Hey everybody, this is Mark Pizzata, and in this video we are going to take a look at strategies for creating inferences. Now let's take a look at some strategies on how to get better at inferencing. So one strategy is to access our prior knowledge and use that to help us with creating inferences. So one way I like to do this is by creating a mind map where I take a look at a couple of different things. So I start the mind map by putting the topic in the center, and then I start thinking about what is it that I know about this subject already. And so that might even be based off of some subtopics as well. Then I take a look at what questions do I have about this topic, and things I want to learn more about. The third is what experiences have I had with this topic. So that could be maybe something I've done. And then finally, the last thing is what are some connections I can make? And those include things like texts that I've read, videos that I've watched, or even movies that I've seen as well. The second strategy is to take a look at using some question and sentence stems. So some questions and sentence stems can be more general for all sorts of different types of texts. So for example, you could say what evidence from the text shows that, and then fill in what your inference is, or I believe that the author said, and then you could use a particular quote because, and then you could put your inference in there. So those would be some examples of some general inferences, but then some sentence stems can be used specifically for particular areas like social studies. A lot of the inferences that we make in social studies fits in well with the historical thinking, like cause and continuity over time, or here's an example of one that takes a look at an author's bias towards a particular subject. Also, we could take a look at cause and effect as well as a type of inference that a student can make. In literature, we can take a look at a lot of things when it comes to making inferences. So for example, we can take a look at author's craft, like word choice, and make inferences about that. We can also make inferences about the historical time period and the context that that has. Another thing that we can do is we can link what we are reading in literature to our own lives and what kind of connections that we can make with that. Science, a lot of the inferences that we take a look at are around the idea of the conclusions or the explanations that we read about, and how the author uses different evidence to suggest certain things about those conclusions. And also a lot of the scientific method deals around the idea of how do we make inferences based off of the observations that we have from our scientific experiments. In math class, we can take a look at how we can use inferences to use with mathematical modeling. So for example, we could take a look at a mathematical process and talk about what kind of real-world problems that can be solved using that process. Or another way to phrase that too would be just to take a look at what are some examples of those mathematical processes in our life. The last strategy that we're going to take a look at is looking at the inferring process. And I actually have two processes that I like to use. Each one has their own strengths and weaknesses. The first process takes a look at a question. That would be an inferring question, similar to the ones that we talked about previously with our sentence and question stems. And then taking a look for what would be some details that would reinforce or perhaps answer the question that we're looking at. And then finally, the last piece is then using that information to be able to create the inference using the details that we just found to be able to answer that question. The second process is a little bit different. It almost takes kind of like I guess you could say it's like a detective's approach to it, where you start off, instead of a question, you start off with an actual detail, and then you ask yourself, okay, what are some inferences that I might be able to make based off of this detail? And so then you start thinking about, all right, if this is the case, then what would be some other details from my life, from the story, from the text, from other texts that would be able to support it. And of course, if you don't find a lot, then you might want to go back to your first question, which was what inferences can I make, and take a look at what might be some other inferences that could be made. Thanks for joining us. If you thought the video was helpful, hit that like button, share it with a friend. Go ahead and add your comments below, or you can always join us at thelearningframework.com for more resources and videos.